Welcome all. Thank you for joining us on this first morning of Clean Power 2022 to discuss the findings from ACP's Clean Power Annual Market Report. We released this report earlier this morning. My name is Heather Zichal. I am the CEO of the American Clean Power Association. Joining us today are Alicia Knapp, the CEO of BHE Renewables, the development arm of Berkshire Hathaway Energy, which is the top purchaser of clean power in the country, as identified in the report. Jose Antonio Miranda, the president and CEO of Onshore for Avangrid Renewables, the third largest owner of operating clean power projects in the US, as identified in the report. And also joining us today is John Hensley, American Clean Power Association's Vice President of Research and Analytics, the report's primary author. Before I turn it over to John, Alicia, and Jose to discuss our report and our industry's progress from the perspectives of owners and operators of clean power, I wanted to provide some context for the findings of the report that we'll be talking through today. Our annual market report finds that the clean power industry hit significant milestones in 2021, but that our current growth needs to accelerate if we want to reach a net zero grid by 2035. Don't get me wrong, 2021 marked a record year for clean power. Our industry reached a major milestone, surpassing 200 gigawatts of energy capacity provided by wind, solar, and battery storage. That's enough electricity to power 56 million American homes. And wind, solar, and battery storage represented 81% of all new power additions in 2021. That volume of installations means that the industry installed a record 28.5 gigawatts of clean power in 2021. But despite this laudable progress, the rate of deployment must accelerate at a much faster pace than it did in 2021 in order to meet America's climate and emissions goals. We need to increase our project volume by 65% over 2021 to reach a net zero grid by 2035. The headwinds our industry faces this year indicate that we may not be able to even maintain the momentum of the last 2 years in 2022. While installations of solar and storage soared last year, supply chain woes, trade barriers, bottlenecks in transmission, and policy uncertainty all threaten future development. Now, I'd like to do two things. I want to introduce John Hensley to give you more details on our 2021 market report, and then we'll ask Alicia and Jose to talk about how their organizations have been able to navigate this landscape and position themselves as two of the most important players in the industry. John?
Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everyone. Wow, it's been a long road, not only for my team in putting this report together, but also for the industry in achieving that 200 gigawatt milestone. Heather put it in a little bit of context, right? 200 gigawatts, 56 million American homes powered. But I want to provide just a little bit more history so you can see some of the growth of this industry. The first wind turbines in this country went in the ground more than 30 years ago, back in the 1980s. It took us until 2002 before we saw 1 gigawatt of operating wind and solar on the grid. From that point, it would be another 14 years before we passed the milestone of 100 gigawatts. Luckily, the industry did kick into overdrive in the latter part of the 2010s, and it took just 5 years for us to double again to 200 gigawatts and achieve that milestone that we're celebrating today. Now, low cost and demand have really been critical factors in that growth of this industry. Clean power is the top choice of new power capacity on the grid today. As Heather mentioned, 81% of all new power plants added in 2021 were in the form of wind, solar, and battery storage facilities. And that's not a new trend. For the past 5 years, renewables and battery storage represent 63% of all new additions to our electric system. And we don't expect that to stop. Looking forward, over 90% of all projects in the interconnection queues, which is a good leading indicator for the power plants that are going to be added to the grid, are in the form of wind, solar, and battery storage. Now, clean power has become an integral part of the electricity system. Today, over 13% of your electricity comes from wind and solar plants across the country. In certain states, that percentage is even higher. States like Iowa, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Kansas all generate more than 40% of their electricity from wind and solar projects. And Iowa leads the way at 56% of their generation mix coming from solar and wind. Here in Texas, the Lone Star State is the leader in wind and solar generation. The state generates 116 terawatt hours of electricity from wind and solar projects. That's roughly equivalent to about 24% of the state's electricity needs, so certainly a big part of the grid down here in Texas. Now, demand for clean energy also continues to rise. Buyers, both utilities and C&I customers, set a record in 2021 for new clean power purchase agreements being announced. Those companies announced 29 gigawatts of new PPAs in 2021, a full 28% increase on the volumes that we saw in 2020. And for the first time on record, we saw C&I buyers surpass utilities to buy the most clean power in a given year. They captured about 54% of the market. And top buyers in the C&I space include companies like Amazon, Meta, Verizon, and Total Energies. On the utility side, top buyers for the year include companies like Clean Power Alliance, American Electric Power, and the Tennessee Valley Authority. Now, besides generating clean electricity and delivering low-cost electricity, clean power projects also deliver for the economy and the environment. The industry invested over $40 billion in new projects for the grid last year. 80% of those projects are located in low-income counties, meaning that these investments are taking place in the areas that need them most. In addition to that, every year, projects pay out over $2.5 billion to local communities. Those funds go to help fund things like schools, local infrastructure projects, and other critical investment needs at the community level. On the emission side of things, every year these clean power projects deliver over 398 million metric tons of carbon emissions avoidance. That's like taking 86 million cars off the road. In addition, those clean air benefits that we all benefit from as a lack of carbon being in the system and in the air delivers over between $18 to $47 billion in health benefits to Americans across the country. So there's a lot to celebrate here. However, let's not deceive ourselves. The industry continues to meet challenges every day. Transmission investment seriously lags. Last year, we only built 386 miles of new transmission, woefully under the volumes that we need to enable the clean energy transition and help to deliver the great clean energy resources that we have in this country to demand centers. Meanwhile, unrelenting COVID-19 challenges, supply chain constraints, inflation, trade barriers, and interconnection bottlenecks all continue to contribute to flat growth. And let's be honest, last year we saw flat growth. We installed the same amount in 2020 as we did in 2021. This is critical. We need to be transitioning. We need to be deploying more and more renewables every year. That's what's needed in order to enable the clean energy transition that will help to push this country towards a net zero emissions grid by 2035. Thanks.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank the American Clean Power Association for leading policy efforts that support more clean energy and lower emissions. The association's work is incredibly important as our industry continues to transform and transition to deliver a cleaner energy economy. I'm Alicia Knapp, President and CEO of BHE Renewables, which is part of Berkshire Hathaway Energy. At Berkshire Hathaway Energy, as of year-end 2021, we have invested more than $35 billion in wind, solar, and geothermal projects that we own. And we also provided nearly $7 billion of financing for other wind energy projects. According to the 2021 Clean Power Annual Report that was just released, our investor-owned utilities have the most operating clean power. Berkshire Hathaway Energy also has the second largest operating renewable fleet and, as Heather mentioned, is the top purchaser of renewable energy. We're very proud to be leading the way to a sustainable energy future. The goal is to achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions, and part of that is generating more renewable energy. But to do it, we also have to expand our transmission system, and that's key. But it's not enough to just deliver more clean energy. It has to be reliable and affordable for our customers. So first, let's talk about reliability. This is a key priority for our organization and the industry. As we transition to cleaner energy, we need to be sure our customers can still count on us to meet the needs of their lives and their businesses. It means we have to advance energy storage And we have to recognize the benefits of clean baseload geothermal energy. We're constantly innovating and exploring new opportunities in these areas. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Department of Energy announced that $3.1 billion in funding would be made available to boost domestic battery manufacturing and supply chains. And there are more opportunities where Berkshire Hathaway Energy and the American Clean Power Association can work together. I mentioned affordability. Federal and state policies play a major role in pricing, so we need to work together to properly value clean energy investments and the values of energy security and reducing emissions. As energy providers, we're all dealing with some of the same challenges. And so we all rely on the association's policy efforts to help remove barriers to accelerate clean energy growth, like working to create a more stable supply chain and working towards more efficient and affordable siting and permitting for new projects. These are just some of the ways that the association benefits us all and the customers we serve. And so I want to share with you how proud we are at Berkshire Hathaway Energy to be a founding member of the American Clean Power Association. We thank the other members and the association staff for supporting the efforts that are truly transforming our industry. And as you heard before me, we definitely have a lot of work to do. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jose Antonio Miranda, Onshore President and CEO of Avangrid Renewables.
Thank you, Alicia. Good morning, and thank you to ACP for the opportunity to be here with all of you today and for organizing this important event. As you have heard from John, from Heather, our industry continues to make incredible progress, and the momentum and need of green energy is greater than ever. For Avangrid Renewables, we are incredibly proud to be a leading company in the effort to build a sustainable energy future for all. We have the third largest portfolio of clean energy assets in the country, and today we operate 8,000 megawatts of wind and solar across 23 states. One of those states is Texas. It's our host for this year's conference, and Avangrid played an important role during the Uri storm that caused significant power outages and extraordinary hardship for many residents. Even through that extreme weather, our agile and dedicated operation team safely maximized generation and delivered power to our customers under exceptionally challenging conditions when they needed it most. Avangrid is also recognized as the leading offshore wind developer in the US, with approx 5,000 megawatts of projects in the portfolio that includes the first in the nation 800 megawatts Vineyard Wind project. And as we continue to grow our renewable portfolio, both onshore and offshore, we are laser focused on positively impacting our society by creating new high-quality jobs across the US. To that end, we are committed to ACP's Energy Transition for All platform, which is focused to ensure workers, communities, and those historically left behind benefit from the transition for a clean energy future. We are upholding our commitment to these principles by broadening our recruitment to target workers from disadvantaged communities, funding college scholarships, and targeting critical investments in our offshore business to local communities like Bridgeport, Salem, Somerset, or New Bedford. As Heather explained to us before, our industry also is facing some new challenges, but not only threatening the progress that we make, but also potential jobs for the economic growth. Due to the gas supply crisis caused by the war in Ukraine, the need of energy independence and the affordable energy has never been higher than it is at this moment. And the renewable energy brings the solution to such needs. Solar can and must play a critical role, putting thousands of people to work across the country. But to do so, we need a swift resolution from the Department of Commerce on the anti-circumvention probe. Likewise, offshore wind faces also a threat from language included in the Coast Guard authorization bill that has passed the House on vessel crewing. We stand with the amendment sponsors in supporting US vessel construction and putting US workers to work. We need to do so by investing in mariner training programs, vessel financing, and port infrastructure. We are working with our colleagues in the industry to find a productive path forward with Congress that supports our national clean energy and climate goals and the development of a US offshore wind workforce. I'd like to conclude by saying that we're passionate about this incredible opportunity in front of all of us to build the clean energy future for America. And I'd like to thank ACP for organizing this important event, and we look forward to working together to build on the progress that we have already made. Thank you very much, and now I pass it to Heather for some closing remarks.
Well, there you have it. Lots of information, lots of different perspectives, and I know we have a handful of reporters, and reporters usually have a question or two, so we would love to entertain any questions you might have. Yes.
Could you expand more on the solar investigation?
Absolutely. So I will, the question is about the Oxen solar petition at the Department of Commerce and the implications that is having for the deployment of solar. I'll start and would welcome anybody to join me if you like, but you know, we continue to be very concerned about the Commerce Department's decision to initiate an investigation, and you know, the case is known as the Oxen case. What is very disconcerting to the industry is what is known as the retroactive tariffs. Those tariff rates can go up to 250%. Though just the threat of that out there and the requirement that an industry would have to carry that risk has led to a major standstill in the deployment of clean energy. Today, I can point to many decisions that companies are faced with that are delaying and scrapping solar projects across the country. So we've got, as we think about what we as an industry are trying to achieve, we're looking now, instead of deployment of clean energy, instead of all of these planned solar projects being deployed, we actually are dealing with states and utilities that are making decisions to keep coal assets generating longer. We're you know, seeing, again, thousands and thousands of jobs impacted by the delays and potential scrapping of these solar investments and solar projects. And the, I think, most frustrating piece of all of this is that this is a Department of Commerce decision that is 100% up to and discretionary. So we've got a Biden administration that says a lot of the right things about deploying clean energy, but then when you look at the policies and the substance, we're actually going in the wrong direction. Do you want to add anything?
I can just say, in a nutshell, solar farms, they are quite intensive during the construction phase in manpower, because in a typical 200 megawatt solar farm, you have 300 people assembling the panels. If you don't have panels, that people is not going to be able to work. That's it. So we hope that that can be resolved quickly and we can have panels to assemble. Thank you.
Other questions?
The volumes in the wind
sorry.
industry has flatlined. In your forecast, do you see that flatlining as a continuation, or do you think the volumes will be ramped up in the near future?
So I mean, I think this industry, I'm going to answer I'll give my top line answer, and then I'll actually turn it over to John, who is the smart person in the room. So as an industry, we have the potential to grow, but there's so much uncertainty in the policy front. Like for example, what's going to happen with the tax policies and the potential around what's been called Build Back Better, right? That climate package provides certainty and predictability for this industry to flourish. On top of that, as we talked about the Commerce Department decision, if you talk about offshore winds, there are huge challenges in the permitting process that we're facing with the Department of Interior. And so I think we have an opportunity to bloom as an industry and really grow, but with all the uncertainty around the policy frameworks at a federal level, that is really what's creating those headwinds today. And John, I'll turn it to you to talk about the future.
Yeah, so again, there's a lot of potential out there, right? The costs have come down over the last decade. We're a very competitive resource. Grid operators have learned how to integrate renewables in a very efficient manner, right? So, you know, a lot of the pieces are in place. However, as Heather mentioned, there's just a ton of uncertainty built into the system, whether it's from trade barriers, policy uncertainty. You know, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rear its ugly head in terms of supply chain challenges, extraordinarily high freight costs, really high commodity prices that we're seeing across the country. And this is, you know, as we look forward, translating in a ton of uncertainty around what the future is going to look like. And if you, in the report, you'll see forecasts for each of the 4 technologies that we cover: wind, land-based wind and offshore wind, utility solar, and utility storage. And you'll notice that there's just a huge range of predictions on what's going to happen over the next 5 and 10 years. And that's, you know, in large part due to this uncertainty and frankly, a lack of clear vision on exactly how a lot of these things are going to resolve themselves.
A question that was emailed in for you, Alicia. What are the biggest investments that Berkshire Hathaway is looking to make in the renewables sector in the coming years?
Sure. So the biggest investments at BHE Renewables, not at BHE Renewables, did you say Berkshire Hathaway Energy? Okay, thank you. So Mid-American Energy Company announced $3.9 billion investment in wind and solar in Iowa. We have significant transmission expansions at Nevada Energy and investments at PacifiCorp as well. So Mid-American, our 3 utility companies are positioned very well to expand the transmission infrastructure necessary to incorporate renewables into the system, as well as expand in renewables, wind, solar, and energy storage as well.
There was also a question for Jose, was that with your development portfolio, of some of the headwinds that have been described and the challenges, has that impacted your development portfolio? What does it look like going ahead?
Well, I think that currently across the board of all developers, not only Avangrid, we are kind of now accelerating a little bit more the portfolio of wind versus solar, at least until the situation with the anti-circumvention is clarified. But the fundamentals and the long run is not changing at all. In our case, our company has 14 gigawatts of portfolio for solar and 3 gigawatts for wind, which is massive. And also, I don't want to forget all our portfolio for offshore wind, which is more than, as I said before, 5 gigawatts. So all in all, I think that if you look in the long run, there are no big change, but in the short term, probably a shift toward wind, we will see that. Thank you.
You mentioned some of the headwinds created by the supply chain issues, which I think we saw start to rear their head in the second half of last year. Just curious what your forecast is. I mean, has that been alleviating? How long do you think that's going to remain a challenge now with a little bit more visibility?
Yeah, so if we think back a year ago, right, people would have thought that a lot of these challenges would have been resolved by now. Unfortunately, they're not. And it's across the board, right? And I think some of the slowdowns that we've seen in China are part of this, right? You've got lockdowns in a lot of cities across the country with critical components coming out of there. Again, freight issues around the world have been a major issue. Really expensive. We've seen a 10x jump in shipping costs. Even transportation logistics here in the U.S. have also gone up substantially, leading to further delays, difficulty getting products out of ports into sites. So, they're mounting and they're sort of everywhere you look. But, the industry's smart, it's adaptable, it's figuring out solutions, and hopefully we see some mitigation over that within the next 6 months to a year.
Thank you.
One more from online for John. Can you recap for us the wind and solar storage markets and how does that compare to previous years?
Yeah, good question. So we actually saw a record year for both solar and storage installations in 2021. Wind had actually its second best year on record. It was down slightly from 2020, which was the best year for wind on record. Again, in total, we saw 28.5 gigawatts of wind, solar, and battery storage installed for the year. Really, battery storage was the biggest growth market, just seeing substantial gains in that industry. And we expect that to continue. I mean, it's not without its own challenges. A lot of those projects are tied to solar facilities, and the slowdowns that we're seeing from the WRO and the auction case can certainly impact some of those storage facilities. But you know, a somewhat nascent industry that's on a growth trajectory at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Jose, you mentioned.
Well,
I'm
we
sorry.
have
Does somebody else
there's
have a? Oh,
two more.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is for Jose. With the offshore wind that Avangrid is a part of, can we expect to see Avangrid participate in the California offshore wind lease auction at the end of this year?
Could you repeat that question? For which?
The California offshore wind. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we already have 5 gigawatts of pipeline in offshore, so we feel comfortable with that pipeline. But of course, we are evaluating every single opportunity. California is one of them, but Oregon will be another one, and also in the Gulf Coast. So it will depend on the final basis of the auction. But yes, we are going to for sure look carefully to all the opportunities. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I mean, Jose, you mentioned that the auction case is going to affect how you balance wind and solar. You're going to maybe move forward with some of these wind projects more rapidly because solar stuff is being put on hold. I'm curious, industry-wide, is that something that you all see happening, that wind projects could be accelerated because of the auction case? Because as developers kind of have to pivot away from solar?
I would add to what Jose said about we definitely see projects slowing down on the solar side. We're pursuing wind and solar at the same time, and so thinking that the solar is going to slow down and wind is going to take its place, I don't think we're going to see that. We will have a net loss of renewable capacity added to the grid if we're not able to get through these issues on solar. And I can speak to within BHE, Nevada Energy has 600 megawatts of solar that's at risk if they can't get through the issues that they're running into with panel availability. And so it's a real issue across the industry, and I don't think that it is likely that wind is going to fill in for solar in the meantime while we figure it out.
Thank you.
I'll add a couple points to that I think are pretty important. One, depending on what decisions developers make about their portfolio, you've heard that companies are delaying fossil plant retirements. Their transition to clean energy is probably not going to happen as quickly as they would have thought a year ago. The problem is that means there's going to be much more fossil generation that happens in 2022 and 2023 than what we otherwise might have expected. So that means more emissions, in addition to all the economic impacts that we've seen from the lost jobs, the lost investment from those projects, not being able to move forward or delayed at the moment. So that's a real issue. Second, I sort of touched on the storage piece of this, but the vast majority of storage facilities are tied to solar projects. And so, we see at the moment that about 50+% of storage facilities out there are at risk as a result of this auction case. So, it's not just impacting the solar industry, it's having ripple effects across the other technologies as well.
Thank you all. We hope to see you around the conference.